Hello again, welcome to my AMA, our usual Friday night rendezvous. I've had a few meetings and questions, when you be out and about during the week, and some of them I promised that I'd bring them on tonight and answer them while we're waiting for other questions to come in maybe. And this one seems to be on everyone's mind at the moment. What can be done about the cost of rents, renting an apartment? And it all seems to be out of control, not only in Dublin and maybe the other cities, but now it starts to come into the bigger towns where, what can be done about it, right? So let's just start by saying the difference between a demand and a need is ability to pay. Now, lots of you may not agree with what I'm saying, and that's okay, I don't mind. But you want to get to know the way I think if you are going to support me with your number one vote. A need for, we'll say, a rented apartment or a house is one thing. When you've no money, you still need it, but you don't have the ability to pay. And a demand is when you have the ability to pay and you can demand certain things. You can demand, first of all, the availability of the accommodation, be it for purchase or rent. Okay? Now, when the problems occurred in this country, the then government made certain moves, and over a couple of years after the problem started, they made other moves. And then this current government came in and made a few changes as well. Now, the banks had on their balance sheets a lot of buy-to-let properties. So what could be done with them? And the answer, of course, was to stop people thinking of buying. Now, whether you agree with it or not, I don't agree with it, but whether you agree with it or not, you can just, understand the logic. You want to rent something, stop people buying houses if you want to rent houses and apartments. So the governor of the central bank, new governor came from third level education, Patrick Honohan. They had a long look at this. Now, I don't know who was advising him, whether he was advised at all, or who was pressuring him. If you look around what's happening now, you would imagine that there was some obvious pressure brought to bear on him. When he introduced the mandatory deposit for the purchase of new house, when for the previous 20 years nearly, the whole country was used to no deposit required. In actual fact, some of the banks were giving out the 100% purchase price of a house plus the cost of furnishing the house in the mortgage. So the nation, the people in the country, younger people who were, we'll say, 10 and 12, and after 7 or 8 years of that were 19, 20, looking to buy places, they got this money. And on the back of bankers getting commission, no one cared who was getting these mortgages. What was important was the commission. So when the problem occurred, of course, the bank had all these buy-to-let properties, these investment properties on their books. So stop people buying, force them to rent. When that was first put out, a few years ago now, and you could check back through the Facebook posts that I put up, I said what is happening now would happen. The demand is there there's a shortage of that accommodation, so the price goes up. And then the banks want to get rid of a lot of the stuff on their books. So income private equity firms You can call them whatever name you like. And remember, at the point that they came in, they weren't coming in without significant discounts. And those discounts was to take care of any fluctuation in market conditions. And it's all kind of standard enough when you're reading about it. Some of you might be reading about it, others may not. It's not complicated. But you're feeling the effects of it now. And you also have people who have properties to let are saying, well, if I can get 10 euros a week more for this, then that's what I'm doing. And can you blame them? The answer, of course, is no. You'd probably do the same thing yourself. So we have to realise what the situation is before we start talking about we want to do something about it. Now, who's calling for this? We want to do something about it. From what I can gather and what I see, you don't want to pay anything. You go and march on the street and the politician starts listening to you. And what else are you going to do when you start marching and talking about everything that you don't want to pay for? So we've got to stop listening to this. There are lots of people out there who are, we'll say, middle class people working away, and all their money has been taken to support these. I don't want to be derogatory when I say it, but there's a particular demand there. Like, we're entitled to have this need fulfilled because we're alive. That's, for me, that goes against all my experience, my education, my work life. Everything about me goes against people like that. No effort. Some of them are sitting there on these mortgages and hoping that all the money will be paid off for them so they can go and do the very same thing again. And this is the problem for the current government, or any government that's in there. Doing something about the rent. All you have to do is the rent roll, the roll that the owner gets from the rent, tax it. You know, special tax, a designer tax, the very same way you could call it by its proper name, a tariff, designer tax, pointed at landlords and say, you have to pay 90% of what you get in rent. It's simple then. That tax comes into the government, and of course all these people who are needy people looking for this money, they get it off the government. It's just a vicious circle. Now, the question that I have is, what can be done? That can be done. Some people agree with this. Other people, they don't. They want the market to sort it out. They have to get more housing available. My proposal, which was to give people the money, and they're paying for it because they're giving you back the right to their pension. So they're paying for it. All you're doing, all the government is doing, is working with the citizens of the country, the people in the country. Now, that might have a small inflationary effect, but that will only be until we have the people back, the people necessary to rebuild and actually build all these houses. And that's a bit long-winded to go into, but I can, and later, if you want to talk to me some other time about it, I'll explain that to you. But it's a way of saying to someone, there's the money to buy your house. Now you go out. You don't need government interference. The system could be put up in such a way that it becomes government proof. You know, the way you have child locks on cabinets in kitchens, it's child proof. We've got to make some of these systems that allow people to pay government proof, so there can't be interference. We can't have these. designer taxes pointed at any particular person goes and educates themselves. They go out and work hard to earn money, and instead of having that type of that id, for the want of a better term, enjoy myself with the money, they start to save it and they start to invest it. Why should those people be punished because of mistakes by others, neglect by others? It's a question now. I'm only saying the question. I've given my way of solving the problem. The question I was asked was what could be done about the rents right now. And if the government came out tomorrow with this designer tax, it's gone. I mean, it's the buzzword now all over Europe. The United States, China, Canada is involved now. The UK are going to get it in the neck when they come into their Brexit, and then they're going to retaliate. And watch what happens then. So it's one thing to start solving a problem now, and the problem of rent and anything got to do with that type of investment is a wicked problem, because you can't solve it without causing a bigger problem. And we have to be very, very careful about that. Now, I'm confident that has answered the question in so far as, again, come back to me later, or if you see me on the street. I'm going around the constituencies now, Longford and Westmeath. You could pull me up on any of this or any other question that you might have. Don't forget, if you want to work with government, I think government should want to work with you. Our current government have kind of cocooned themselves into Dublin 4 with control of the media. It's unfortunate, and it's one of the things that will have to change, and I can talk about that as well and show you how to do that, right, later. So let me go on to question number 2. Excuse me. And I remember having this discussion, and when I started to go into it, the guy that asked me, he started laughing. He says, "Jeez, if I thought I was going to get that sort of an answer in that length of time, I wouldn't have bothered asking." But this is how it goes. It says here, what does a sovereign nation mean? Now, it seems like a fairly straightforward question, but it's a very important question, and an understanding of the answer is also very important. So let's just say we're going to begin the answer to this question tonight and get people to understand the whole sovereign name or caption. So a sovereign nation it's simple in itself. Is a nation that controls its own currency, can print its own currency whenever it wants to. Now, what is the EU not? It is not a sovereign nation. We have a whole range of people who are members of the EU, and what they all have in common is there's none of them can control their own currency. Now, the UK was outside of that. There are fringe countries around that have special agreements for trade and stuff with the EU, but none of them have relinquished their own currency. And it's the reason, it's the big part of the reason why everyone wonders why Ireland are paying bigger interest rates than other countries. Because, like, take the US for example. Everyone knows, giving them money, all they have to do is print off more. They're not going to default on the repayment. That may come, maybe the same for Ireland and other countries within the EU, but it's not without the permission of the EU. Now, anyone that wants to control that, all they have to do is control a small element within the EU. And this is the problem the biggest problem that I see with the EU and this whole protectionist, socialist approach. Whenever the disconnect comes with the UK, and there may be a little while where, the English pound devalues a little bit. But if you think about devaluing a currency, what does that do? It makes all the products that you make, by comparison to other currencies, cheaper. So your exports are going to go. The demand for those products is going to rise. Production has to increase to meet that demand. So the prospect of more employment from that is there. Now, this was before the EU came about and all that. This was a way that countries had of getting through bad times with regard to devaluing their currencies deliberately. Well, again, it's something that we can go into later stage if I'm losing you. But if you now look at where the money came from in that quantitative easing program that cost trillions of euros, it was just printed on whose word and for whom? Where is that money now? And why hasn't that affected our interest rate and inflation? Why hasn't the cost of living gone up with the availability of all this money? Now, I'm not going to try and bore you with the reasons there, but if you want the answers, let me know in the questions and I'll come back to it and I will tell you exactly what happened with that money, who got it, and who decided that it was going to be printed like this. But I want you to think about that. And I want you also to think about if as a representative, your representative in Dáil Éireann, there's none of this going to go past me. So when all this talk comes up, the pertinent questions will be asked. And I don't mind if I don't get talk time in the Dáil. I'd certainly get talk time outside the Dáil gates. And I make sure I do, from international news media, not the controlled news media that we have in this country. Now, just think about what I'm after saying, and remember the first question that I got was about the rents and the control of one person going in and 25% mandatory deposits put for new houses. If this is supposed to be an open, free market, how can these people influence the market like that? Just think about that. And I know everyone is on, I see it on social media, they're all calling for to end this corrupt government. I see there's a group going round headed up by an excellent girl, Gemma Doherty, and they're saying, we have to end the corruption. And fine, if they think corruption is there, let's see it. Report it out there as an official complaint to An Garda Síochána. No point standing up on the soapbox shouting about the problems. You've got to make the official complaint, back it up with the evidence, and then something has to be done about it. If you think about a couple of things that have happened in history, when the Russian Revolution in 1917, and all the Russians stood around when they killed off the Romanov family. The question was, and it was like a comedy, imagine, what are we going to do now? Who's going to do now? Who's going to tell us what to do now? And look at Russia and look at what has happened in that country since, and look at who's ruling it now. Look also at the French and the system. There's a man gone in there, Macron, he's in there now, and he's coming away from that whole socialist idea, and they're thinking about the guillotine again for him. So I use these inflammatory terms so as to make it just think about things. But in history, so, and we hear these people on social media talking about we have to get rid of this government that's corrupt. And then you ask the question, who's going to replace them? And the talk is, oh, the provisional Sinn Féin. And there's where it all ends. There's where all the credibility that they have goes out the window. There's no future for this country with the provisional Sinn Féin having any say in how this country is run. And I can go into that again. And if any of them out there want to come on the screen or want to meet me in open debate about this, you know where I am. So it's not an easy situation for any government to be in there. And they may have their motives. I don't believe that there's a politician in Ireland, an elected politician in Ireland, that wakes up every morning and says to him or herself, now what can I do today to make things awful for everybody? It happens because they don't concentrate on making it right. And when it comes to making things right, you must have rules in place that monitor what's going on. And people have to be held accountable. And how, I'll just touch on it, how the wealth that the nation generates, how it's transferred to the citizens of the country is through our public services. And those conduits have to be efficient. And unfortunately, for a long, long time, they're not. And that's another thing I would do going in there. I would hold them accountable and I would end tenure within the civil service. It's the only answer. Everything else, more or less, including the kitchen sink, has been tried. We've got Sláintecare being fronted by Roisin Shorthall now. Read it and read the funding part of it and come back and tell me that I'm wrong. Okay, sorry, I'll go on again now. The next question is, it's more got to do with where I'm from here in Athlone. What can be done about the drug problems in Athlone? Now, I say Athlone here because that's the way I was asked the question. This is a problem that permeates throughout this country. And I believe that the members of An Garda Síochána are working very, very hard in this area. I also believe that they're totally undertrained and they don't have what they want and what's required to help them in their fight against this drug. Now, how do we fight against this drug? And the best way to put this is there has to be a number of avenues. The people caught up in it. Why are they using drugs in the first place? That whole social question. Everyone talking about the corruption that's in this country and talking it down. Remember when I spoke first, I said it's much easier. I'm looking at 2 glasses of water here in front of me, by the way, and I'm to say that the glass is half empty instead of saying the glass is half full. We've too many people saying the glass is half empty in this country. Now, we've got to start looking, for sure, we've got to start looking at painting the picture, the vision of the future for the citizenry of this country. And we're not doing that. The best we're getting from governments, successive governments, is, we have a 5-year plan that comes out when there's a year left or less in the current time they're in. So they give you the impression that you have to vote for us to continue to do this. And then it's forgotten about until the next 4-year term comes along. And you have to start asking yourself the question, when are we going to get people in there that want to work in the best interest of the country generally, and not like the best interest of the protected few? And the manifestation of that attitude is a big reason why we have a drug problem throughout this country. We've got a lot of people Now, I have reasonable experience in this. I've been working with a particular charity for the last, well, I call it a charity. We don't look for donations that are tax allowed. We don't even look for that. We fund ourselves a different way, but it's for and on behalf of helping people who want to come out of the drugs, who want to come out of addiction generally, is what we're at. And I have some experience in this. And let me tell you, the helplessness, the acceptance that this is as far as we're going to get and we have to make the best of what's going on here. All because the glass half empty attitude and no vision for a brighter future in this country. You know, everything is an argument. Now, in saying that, another one of those channels has to be the deterrent for breaking the law. You know, you cannot start taking people who are addicted to this drugs and, you know, who are used as mules for the drug barons, and start kind of, they're creating them. There's a conveyor belt of creation for them. So the first thing I spoke about there is tackling that. The next thing is we've got to get after these drug barons, and we have to resource the members of An Garda Síochána, and we have to resource the Criminal Assets Bureau. So it has to be made clear in Ireland that this crime doesn't pay. It may take us a little bit of time to get after you, but we're going to do it. Now that time is sometimes a little bit longer, but other times it can be shorter if we concentrate our resources on it. Now, you know, the movement of people to the courts, we should have a number of judges that are there specifically for these problems, so there can be no delay, and there can't be any question of, you know, we have to pick 12 of our peers to bring them in as jury. You know, special criminal courts are needed here. This is a particular problem. We can't start fighting a 21st century problem with 18th century rules. We have to adapt and we have to change to give ourselves a chance of making this work. So this is what needs to be done in Athlone and in a whole range of other towns in Athlone. We've got to get behind the Garda Síochána and resource them properly. We've got to get our social workers that are at the front of this. I meet some of them, you know. Some of them I wouldn't give you tuppence for because they don't care. And you can say that about some of the members of An Garda Síochána as well. But that can be resolved by training. And if you're not training or you don't want to do this job, then you have to go. You lose the job, you're gone. So it can't be a case of we have to keep you on, or to date, we'll move you sideways and maybe upwards. You can't be fired. No, that has to go. We've got to bring in 21st century thinking for 21st century problems and deal with them. We have too many people who allow the problem to be there in the first place with the authority to bring in the solution. Everything they do is compromised. It has to be. There's nobody going to look in the mirror and point the finger at themselves. You're to blame. So we get away from that. Let's follow up, and I'll be coming shortly with more about how we might resource and how we might talk about our Justice Department and our Defence Department, and I'm going to put the two of them in the one presentation on it. So, excuse me, I'll get another drink. So I think that covers that a little. The next question is, do you think we should be part of the new proposed EU army, and should we be neutral? Should we continue with our neutrality? I suppose, look, the first answer I give you to that, or the first part of the answer I give you to that, is this: that if we're officially going to lose our neutrality, it has to be with the okay of the population, the voting population of this country. We have to have a referendum on that. Now, it appears, and I'm saying this, right, in this particular way, it appears that our neutrality is being eroded. Now, if the people of Ireland vote to end our neutrality, then fine. I'm on for be part of this new army. Be part. Asking me directly, would I say my answer would be we must have a referendum. It can't be for a politician to be in deciding. I think what the politician has to say is, if you give me the confidence to go into Dáil Éireann, I'd be saying, hold on, are we putting this to the people? And if not, why not? Because in the long run, like everything else, when it hits the fan, the people are the ones that will have to stand up. So, the answer to the question is, let's have the referendum to decide. But then you have to ask yourself, what is neutrality? You know, we have American aircraft landing in Shannon to be refueled and all. I'm sure they're buying the fuel. I'm sure they're spending copious amounts of money in the Shannon Free Zone down there as they pass through. This is a commercial thing. Now you'll say, yeah, but they shouldn't be landing there. And I'd say to you, sure, the aviation fuel that's in the aircraft that they're landing is coming from Iran. You know, where did they get most of their fuel? Out of the Middle East. They're going off to kill the people that they're getting their fuel from. And then you talk about where's the neutrality in that context. They're at war. We're supplying them these fuels. So where are we pointing at neutrality here? We had a big computer corporation move out of Ireland there a few years ago. They set themselves up in Poland, and not long after that, the American missile defense system moved into Poland. This is all political. So where's the neutrality in our situation there? Or maybe it was there and that's why it was moved on. But there's always a price to be paid for these things, and the conversation the debate around neutrality has to open up all these topics. So as when a person is sitting down to make the decision about this, they know, they're very much aware of the fact that it might be, the future of the country is, how are we going to do this? It'd be difficult for me if I was sitting in the polling booth tomorrow to vote on this. I would be saying we're not neutral anymore. We enjoy the benefits of the rest of the world. Well, most of the rest of the world, and we enjoy it conditionally because of the way the EU have control over us. But that's a discussion for another day. But it can be a great debate on this. But I'd like to see the debate starting with a view to a referendum and stop the erosion that appears to be happening. And I'll just leave it at that. Again, if you meet me or you want to put in other questions on this, it's something that I can get into more with you, or maybe talk at length about different aspects of it. Right? Okay. The next question, fairly short. Right? Do be honest, because it's just yesterday or the day before the results come out. Do we need the leaving cert here in Ireland? Yes, is my answer. Do we need it in its current format? Different question that I'm asking now in being the good Irishman. I'll answer this question by asking another. Do we need it in the current format? And my answer to that is no, we don't. I'm all for modulation here. I think that in the picture of modulation, people going in, young and older ones who are coming back to do it, as they go into the module, they concentrate fully on this module. They're not, for a given period of time, they're not having to jump outside after an hour and a half of whatever into an hour and a half of something else, and again and again and again, maybe 5 different subjects into one day and stuff like that. The world is becoming a very competitive place, and people are specializing a lot. You reach a particular standard of what might be classed as an ability to communicate, but after that you start to specialize in what you like. You know the old adage, if you like what you do, you never have to do a day's work in your life. Maybe it would bring a greater number of people staying in education, and it might mean that the standards that we have would see us moving up in the university table instead of the other way. Lots of people say that that's the reason, because we don't have great facilities in our universities, and I'm saying, well, what facilities do you need to go in and learn, apart from certain subjects where you need equipment and stuff? But you certainly don't need football fields, and you don't need swimming pools and gymnasiums. You need maybe recreation, okay, apart it. But the emphasis is what I'm talking about here. It's too much on this good life, and the whole talk around the university experience. This is better learning, more concentrated learning, if we can start talking about the modulation. Now, I want to hit on something else, and I'll go into this later. I've just started writing up my presentation on this, and it's going to take me a few weeks to get through. Teachers also need to understand that they cannot remain in the positions they're in for too long. They must be moved around. Teachers must be assessed. Their assessment has to be ongoing. Appraisal and upskilling, if you like, has to be continuous in the life of a teacher. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that people don't take this on themselves. I happen to think that it's a noble profession, and one that good people like to help others, get on in life, and they educate them, and some of them it gets the better of them, and we got to see that there's help there for them and that. But generally speaking, the rule, like the system that makes it government proof, is that they cannot stay in the one particular area for any longer than X number of years, and that's it. Regardless, they have to change. Even if, we'll say, in a place like Athlone, they have to change from one school to the other. This is all about the end product. The primary objective is education. It's not about how I live. If you're in, where you're thinking like that, then maybe you're in the wrong profession. You understand? Okay, I'll leave that there, and I'll move on. I'm looking at the time, and I don't want to go over it and stuff. I hear, do we need all the charities that we have in Ireland? This opens up a whole new area for talk and discussion, and what we're involved in and what I'm involved in is done through charity shops. People donate stuff, and there might be a necktie or a shirt or a jacket or a shoes or whatever it is, an ornament or whatever, on sale for €2 or €3. It might be more than that, but depending on how good it is, or a nice piece of furniture that was donated. Other charities you look at get big donations, and when that starts happening, people are in executive roles in these, and we've had trouble a few years ago over people taking money or getting remunerated through the situation. I think we have to be careful around um, the whole idea of tax relief. For me, no, it'll be gone tomorrow. If you want to make a donation to a cause, then the underlying reason can't be, I don't have to give it. You know, think about this. Why are all the charities in Ireland, why are they all there? If we're paying really significant amounts of money to run our civil service, which includes all of these sections that these charities appear in, why are they all appearing? And the logical answer is because the need is not being met. Now, it can be the case, in some cases, I'm sure, the position was, okay, well then let's see if we can help these people organise as part of what we do as government. But then we don't need you. So, in the government position that you're holding down, there's no need for you, so you have to go. Charities, for me, if people want to help other people, either by making a donation or doing something for them, there should be no further incentive than the reward you get yourself for doing it. We had, not too long ago, fairly significant donations being made to charity in an offshore capacity that was allowable here within our tax system. And the money was routed from the charity into foreign accounts for the benefit of the people who donated it. Figure that one out, why people do these things. For me, no. There's great sports bodies in this country. A lot of them are charities, and we get these wonderful sports grants out there, which again, is negative as far as I'm concerned. I'm more concerned about younger people who, for example, who are suffering from disease, this chronic disease. No money for them. There's money to build stadiums from government. And remember where the money that these government people get, remember where they get it. And remember what I said about designer taxes for purpose, tax for purpose, right? Okay, look at the support that the GAA have for the different sports. A wonderful organisation. Just look at the sport. On Sunday, the Hurling All-Ireland, there'll be 70,000 people paying, 40 or 50 euros a ticket? Yet, taxpayers' money was taken and donated to them to build a stadium down in Cork. I don't get it, where you've no money to help kids that have scoliosis. We have little money to put into research to find cures for these things. And I'll cover all these again when I come on to it, when I start talking about our health services. Again, you have to familiarise yourself with me so as you know what you're getting, and you can either vote or not vote. That's your choice, of course. But I don't like the idea that able-bodied people should get taxpayers' money when people who are suffering through no fault of their own can't. Now, I look here, and I'm going to talk specifically here. We have local TDs and we have local senators who were standing up saying, we fought hard to get the sporting grants for you. Now, that may have been acceptable in the past, but it's not acceptable from here on. And they're going to get criticism every time they say things like this. all getting together like, like a little beehive to get into a photograph. This is all our doing. Well, it's not their doing at all. Surely you've copped onto that at this stage. So, do we need all these charities? The answer is no. What can we do about them? We can start, first of all, curtailing the offshoot. No one wants to come in overnight and put a situation of people where they're at sixes and sevens with regard to how we're going to manage now. So over the period of, we'll say, 2 years from now, or from the day that the new government goes in, everyone is of this, understands then we have 2 years to sort this out, and then we're not getting any more money. There's no more grants coming to us. There's no more tax allowances coming to us. The focus then, you'll see as a result of that, the focus will turn and focus in on people who are collecting taxes and are supposed to be doing their job and getting paid from these taxes. And they're not doing their job. And I don't care who says to me that all our civil servants are all are working hard. They are not. And they have a huge inadequate management problem. If anything was remotely right with regard to it, we wouldn't have the number of problems that we have. And that's not taking away from all the good things that are done. Let me say that. I'm a half full, glass half full guy. So I'm not getting at the 20% of the people who do 80% of the work within the civil service. I want everyone doing their share, and I would want to monitor that. And if they're not doing it, I have to be asking them why. And if the excuse or the reasons are not good enough, then they have to vacate those positions and go and find work elsewhere. The day for this is gone. The pace of change that has come into the first world society where we're living, believe it or not, has picked up. Look at the difficulties we're going to have going into the future if we don't start adapting new measures to deal with our climate. I'm just saying, we cannot continue to train and compete at 18th, 19th century attitude in the 21st century, right? I spoke a few minutes ago on the sovereignty, right? What is it to be a sovereign nation? But just think about this. All these rich Chinese that come to buy up half the world, they're coming with government bank money. Very few, if any, are coming with their own. It's the same when it comes out of the United States, when it comes out of Canada. And we're going to learn very shortly, when Brexit happens, that it's going to start coming from the UK. And are we ready for this? What discussion is going on in Europe with regard to this? There's a big discussion going on in the world now about what's called MMT, the modern money theory. There's lots of very, very eminent economists talking in support of this. But that's another day. I'll go into that another day, which I'll explain it. But I need you just to think about these things for now. I'm towards the end now. And I've enjoyed the hour as usual. I've talked myself hoarse, but I want you to, if you have listened, if you need to play it again, to get a feel for who I am and what I want. And if you're in agreement with me, generally in agreement with me, I want you to have the courage of your conviction to stand up and not be afraid to say, I like what he's saying and I'm going to support him. I don't care if we've been members of a party for so long. What he's saying is right. And don't think that you have to be a member of a big party organisation to effect change anywhere. I'm going to make a presentation based around this. Not now, and I'm going to show you how the thinking that we have to be big party to instigate change is 18th century stuff. But we have to operate now in the 21st century, and that means that all the shackles that were around you have to be taken off. I'm going to help you to give you your head and get out there and make really a good life for yourself, much better than 18th century thinking does. So, on that note, and I'm just short of 1 hour talking, next Friday night, I might be making a few changes because I'm not sure of being able to put it on next Friday night, but I'll let you know in plenty of time. And we can get together again. But anytime, message me, I will answer you. You have, I'm making certain videos and certainly I put them up on my website at donaldjackson.com. You can go in there in your own time. None of this empty vessel mind peer pressure on you. Take your time and listen to what I say. And ask yourself, would it be good or better than what we have at the moment? And just have the courage to support me if you think that it is. I'll see you soon. Thanks.